In this week's EV news, VW slashes EV production due to strong customer reluctance. MG launch an MG4 Lease deal in France at a price you will not believe. Polestar become the latest to adopt the North American charging standard in the US. Manchester's Sale Water Park is to host a £1 million EV charging hub. And Toyota and Hyundai get told off over misleading EV advertising. Welcome back to another EV news. Last week's video didn't actually perform that well, which is strange because anything that normally mentions reliance on Chinese products and whether or not we should be using China for stuff normally gets a really big reaction, but it didn't quite take off. So there's a decent chance you didn't see it, and if you want to catch up with that, there's a link in the description. And because you probably didn't see last week's video, I need your help. I would like to launch this series of videos as a podcast. Not replacing this series of videos, everything will remain as it is, but to try and increase the reach and get it in front of more people, I'd like to offer it in an additional format. But every podcast needs a name, and that's where you come in. I would like you to suggest in the comments suggestions for a name for an EV News weekly focused podcast. And the cheesier the better. Let's be honest, if it's catchy, if people are going to remember it, that's what we want. So get yourself in the comments and give me your suggestions. I could quite easily just ask ChatGPT to give me some suggestions and just pick one at random, but a bit of audience participation has never been a bad thing, so let me know what you think. We're still a little bit light on suggestions because not that many people watched last week's video, so I'm opening the floor to you once again. Into the news then, and some unexpected news from VW that they are to cut EV production. They are temporarily scaling back production of electric models at one of their German plants. A shift at their Emden plant in Lower Saxony has been cancelled for the next 2 weeks on the run-up to an extended 4-week summer holiday for workers on EV lines in July and August. The ID4 and early production of the ID7 are the models affected by this. And additionally, 300 of 1,500 temporary workers at the plant won't have their contracts extended in August. Manfred Wolf, head of the Works Council for the plant, indicates that demand for electric vehicles is up to 30% below the originally planned production figures. We are experiencing strong customer reluctance in the electric vehicle sector, he told the Northwest newspaper. A spokesperson for Volkswagen UK said, the Volkswagen brand, like other car manufacturers, is currently seeing softening demand for electric cars. Reasons for this include reduced subsidies, higher inflation, and recent longer delivery times due to a shortage of parts. We are confident that demand for all electric cars will pick up again as the year progresses, and with the extensively revised ID3 and new ID7, we continue to launch attractive new models. In the UK, delivery times for customers placing a factory order are now only around 12 to 15 weeks, due to the significantly improved parts supply situation. Now, as you can imagine, this story is really pleasing people with an anti-EV viewpoint, right? They are having an absolute field day with this. EVs are terrible. I told you nobody wanted to buy them. VW are making less of them and I knew I was right. I told you. Well, that's fairly predictable. Let's be honest, anytime there's any negative mention at all of EVs in the press, people seem to have a field day with it. But what is the real reason that VW are scaling back production of EVs? Could it be, maybe, that Volkswagen EVs are overpriced and not actually that good? I wonder. Back in 2020, you could buy a base model ID3 for £24,990, as VW were trying hard to meet their carbon credit quota. You could almost forgive some of its shortcomings at that kind of money, the dodgy software, the crap ergonomics, because the price was actually quite reasonable. Today, the ID3 is over £30,000 and it still has many of those same issues. Touch-sensitive steering wheel controls that everybody hates. Those stupid window switches that don't let you control the rear windows without messing around pressing the button and then using the same switches you normally use for the front, and just nonsense like that. So, is the real issue then that less people actually want to buy Volkswagen EVs rather than EVs in general? Well, New car sales figures would certainly suggest that that might well be the case. After all, the Tesla Model Y is currently the best selling car, not EV, car in the world. So I would suggest that Volkswagen are just a little bit wide of the mark here. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is the customer reluctance described by VW actually a VW customers don't want EVs or nobody wants VW EVs issue? Or is it actually a wider issue? Are electric car sales really declining? Let me know what you think. Over to France now, where MG are trying to make quite a splash in the market. Partnering with Crédit Agricole Consumer Finance, they are launching a special lease deal on the MG4 where people can lease them for €99 per month. Yes, that's right, €99 per month for a brand new MG4. And this is based on consumers qualifying for what they're calling a super bonus incentive of €7,000 for low-income buyers. And it also includes a €2,500 subsidy for scrapping an older internal combustion engine vehicle. So some really quite big government incentives going on in France. MG is calling this promotion a social leasing offer as a bit of a dig towards a plan that the French government is working on to make EVs more affordable. That official scheme has been delayed several times because the French authorities actually fear that it would benefit mainly Asian brands rather than domestic French car makers. And, well, it seems they might be right. Given that MG can game the existing subsidies that are available and turn them into at least so cheap it's hard to pass up, I hate to think what they'd do if this additional funding was available. The MG4 was the 5th most popular EV sold in France in May. And I mean, this whole thing really, it shows a stark contrast between subsidies available elsewhere in Europe and here in the UK. Well, an MG4 would be significantly more expensive to lease here. In fact, there's a UK dealer currently advertising a PCP deal for £99 per month here, which sounds really good until you realise it's a 24-month deal with an £8,100 deposit and a £16,500 final payment. So those subsidies in France are going a long way towards making these deals more sort of amenable, whereas here in the UK we don't have any government support at all. All the grant schemes for buying EVs is completely gone, and that is the reality. But what do you think? Do the government need to do more in this country to incentivise EV use or ownership so we get to the point where these deals that we have in France are more viable here in the UK? Grant schemes were controversial, to say the least, when they were here, so I think there'll be some really mixed opinions on that, and I'm not overly convinced what we need is a return to massive grants being available to everybody, but perhaps for certain situations it might be worthwhile considering. I quite like the used car interest-free loan thing that was the Scottish Government were offering. I think it might have ended now, but for a period of time, if you're buying a second-hand EV, you could get an interest-free loan to help with the cost of that, and I quite like that. I do wonder if we'd ever see something like that return, especially as the used market is softening. Some of those prices become a bit more affordable to some people, but that a little bit more so if they were able to get government-backed loans to help with those purchases. It'd be interesting to see if anything like that does pan out in the future. Charging connector news next, as Polestar become the latest brand to move to the North American charging standard, NACS, in North America. You may have heard about other manufacturers doing this. Basically what they're doing is they're moving to the Tesla designed connector for charging instead of CCS1, which is the North American version of CCS, which is based on a Type 1 connector. And that is what until now had been used by everybody apart from Tesla for DC charging in the USA. And it's basically like a Type 1 plug within the DC pins below it, much like our CCS is a Type 2 with added DC. Polestar have signed a deal with Tesla giving its owners access to the supercharger network in North America by adopting the standard for all new Polestar vehicles from 2025. And in doing so, they've joined Ford, GM, Rivian, and unsurprisingly, Volvo in moving to this standard. The NACS standard used to be proprietary, but in November, Tesla published the details and made it open to both car makers and charger manufacturers to implement it. Now, this has little relevance to the UK and Europe. We're pretty set over here on CCS2 for charging. Even Tesla use it on all their models, and this proprietary connector doesn't feature here. But it does make things quite interesting in North America, doesn't it? Because if that means that you can open up the Tesla supercharger network to everybody, the charging experience is going to get a lot better for everybody that doesn't have a Tesla, But I could see some Tesla owners being pretty upset by this. Now, as you may or may not know, in the UK, certain Tesla supercharger sites are open to all EVs. You can use the Tesla app and you can charge your non-Tesla using them. But what this does is actually opens all Tesla superchargers in the US up to these other brands. And that is quite interesting, isn't it? If you're a Tesla owner and you bought it because of the supercharger network, it's suddenly being open to anybody that has a Polestar, a Rivian, etc. Might well put your nose out of joint a little bit. But it's great news for everybody else, isn't it? Reliable charging everywhere. As I said, of little relevance to UK viewers, but let me know what you think in the comments. Are Tesla shooting themselves in the foot here? Or is it going to actually lead to there being a really, really good charging network everywhere that everybody can use and everybody's happy? I know there'll be some very, very mixed views on that one, so let me know what you think. People seem to like this, so let's take a look at another used bargain of the week. Something I've seen whilst browsing AutoTrader that has caught my eye. Well, how about this X-Demo Citronami for just £6,990? It's the cheapest one in the country, so I think it must qualify for this segment, even if you think that might still be a little bit pricey. Has 67 miles on the clock, and it is in the showroom at Islington Motor Group in Trowbridge. And let's be honest, it's a little bit of a bargain, isn't it? It has the grey colour pack with it, so it's £1,100 under the list price. And that has to be a bargain with 67 miles on the clock. What do you think? If you were thinking about buying an AMI before, this might be the one that will have you making the call. I'd certainly be tempted if I didn't already have one, and I think it represents pretty good value as far as AMI goes. What do you think? Are you tempted? Charging hub news next. You know I like to bring you news of new charging infrastructure. 16 Ultra Rapids will go live at Sale Water Park in August. It's a 152-acre parkland in Lake in Manchester. This will be the largest ultra rapid charging hub in Greater Manchester, for now at least, until somebody else tries to take the title. The charging operators love this, don't they? We've got the biggest site, and then someone else come along. Yeah, we've got an extra charger. I don't really get it, but let them have their moment, I suppose. It is the latest project from BEV, in collaboration with Trafford Borough Council, which has already seen more than 40 chargers go live across the region. Using Kempower chargers, which, as you probably know by now, are pretty good if you want to be doing load sharing across multiple chargers, multiple bays, there is 1.2 megawatts available across the 16 bays. Trafford Council will retain ownership of the site, and the chargers will be owned, installed and maintained by BEV, who will provide the council with a share of the site's profits. That actually seems like a pretty good way to run things, if you ask me. There's none of this quabbling over who needs to pay for maintenance, who's responsible for this, who's for that, which seems to be a common downfall of this type of install where local councils tend to be involved. BEV is Transport for Greater Manchester's preferred charging provider, and the Sale Water Park site is helping the charge network reach its ambitious target of getting each of Trafford's 236,000 residents within 10 minutes of a charger. I must say, I've never really heard of BEV. This sounds like a really good project though, and if you've got any experience with them and want to tell us about it, let us know what you think in the comments. And finally, both Toyota and Hyundai find themselves in a little bit of hot water with the Advertising Standards Agency. Toyota ran an advert for their BZ4X EV claiming that it made electric easy, charging to 80% in around 30 minutes using a 150 kilowatt rapid charger, but with an asterisk and some small print saying that charging times were subject to local circumstance. And the ASA didn't like that. They considered that consumers would take this to mean that it would always charge that quickly, which, well, I mean, if you've heard anything about the BZ4X, you probably know charging performance isn't one of its strong points, and that's probably not the case. It ruled that because various real-world factors, as we know, like battery temperature, ambient temperature, and battery condition can affect the charging times, that the claim by Toyota was misleading. A further limitation likely to affect the claimed charging times was the availability of 150 kilowatt chargers. The ASA considers that the average consumer might not have an awareness of the speed or availability of 150 kilowatt chargers versus others that are available. Hyundai ran a similar campaign for the Ioniq 5, claiming that it would charge from 10% to 80% in 18 minutes using a 350 kilowatt charger. And the ASA claimed that that also was misleading for the same reasons, telling both Hyundai and Toyota not to run these adverts in their current form again. I'm a little bit torn on this one. I mean, I think it shows that charging networks and car manufacturers really need to do more to educate people about how charging works and availability of chargers and all that kind of stuff. Rather than it being a sort of, oh, they were definitely misleading, I'm not so sure. But making claims about charging times does seem like a bit of a shaky ground, given there are so many variables. What do you think? Do we need to do more in this space? Should there be firmer rules for how we can and can't advertise EVs in terms of the charging times? I do think it's something that needs to be looked at. That's it for this week's EV news. Somehow I don't think we've seen the end of manufacturers making spurious claims about charging times in their adverts though. Let me know what you think about any of these stories in the comments, because your views on them are very, very important. Make sure you also get yourself in there with your podcast name suggestions. We're seriously light on them so far, and I'm going to have to start the ball rolling soon. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on next week's EV news, and I'll see you next time.